It's saying at my end, Leona, that we're live on Facebook.
Okay, let me just refresh the feed. That's us now, Shona. Yeah.
Oh, good, good,
Yeah.
good, good. I thought there was something wrong with my end there. Grand. Okay, I'm just letting everybody else in. How you all doing? How's everybody doing? Thomas, how you doing? Ruth? And all grand? All good? Where are you from last night? Anybody, anything that any questions or anything? Hi, Verity, good to see you. Hi, Josephine, good to see you. Nobody has any questions. I'm going to just, all good, Margaret. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so we didn't do too badly if you're back for night two. Didn't completely put you off last night, did I? Good. That's not a bad sign, Josephine. At least you've come back for me. Excited. Good, Ruth. It's really interesting. This work activates my nervous system, which is really interesting, because a lot of what I'm going to deliver today flies in the face of what we've been taught. So it's always difficult when you go to deliver stuff that I feel is eternally important. So let's see what we've got this evening. I have Thomas, Donna, Ruth, and Anne in front of me. So if you're my Debbie McGee's tonight, you don't mind putting the thumbs up, and if there's anything wrong with the sound, or if there's anything amiss, let me know. Is that all right? Do you mind that role? Is that all right? So if anything goes wrong, you can let me know. Brilliant. And all good in Facebook, Leona. All right there. All right, so tonight's topic is fundamentally about the threat system itself and the functions of the mind within the threat system. And I firmly believe that when we understand those two principles, those two really key principles, that we can understand the presenting issue of the client much better. And we don't tend to get lost in the therapeutic exchange so badly. So we're going to begin with that, but we're just going to recap from last night. So last night we were talking about part one of the model, which was this therapeutic exchange, which was how our clients present. Is that fair enough? And we're still there tonight, hence the importance of it. Hence the understanding of last night, the assessment of where your client is and what pre-work that might be needed. And tonight we're still in that phase one, if you like. And tonight we are understanding the threat system that pertains to the organism and the functions of the mind that pertains to that threat system, and how that presents itself in therapy, how that presents itself in the client's awareness, and how that awareness presents itself in session. Is everybody all right with that? Does that make sense? So I'll reiterate it again, right? What we're looking at tonight is how the client gets triggered and what happens in the mind, and how that becomes an integral part of what you're listening to. And it becomes an integral part of the client's presentation, and it becomes a huge part of why we get trapped in story, why we get trapped not only by our client's incapacity, but by these functions that are supposed to be helping us. Does that make sense? Everybody all right with that? So that's what we're going to pay a lot of interest to. Now, we're talking about presenting issues, and it is important, I think, at this point in the journey to talk about the many ways that anxiety can present itself. And I'm not just talking about presentation of story or presentation of narrative or experience, but I'm talking about clients who may come with a pre-diagnosis. And for that purpose, I'm person-centered trained, and I'm not, as you would understand from a person-centered point of view, I'm not big on the diagnosis. But I think for the purposes of understanding this model, and understanding and differentiating within the model, I think it's really important that we talk about post-traumatic stress as an anxiety, as a presentation issue for anxiety. So post-traumatic stress and complex post-traumatic stress, we understand differently, or we should understand differently diagnostically, really, from generalized anxiety, from social anxiety, from they are separate in terms of how we diagnose them. Is everybody all right with that? So what we understand with post-traumatic stress is that it has had to have been one or many events that have happened over a month ago, and there has been no event previous to it. That's the proper diagnosis. We know that within post-traumatic stress, the acronym trauma helps us understand post-traumatic stress. Then anybody ever seen that before? So the T in trauma when diagnosing post-traumatic stress is about the traumatic event. So we're specifically looking for a traumatic event. Now, why is this important when we talk about presentation issues? Because the client is likely to be coming with a traumatic event. They're likely to become presenting a traumatic event, having memory of. Because the next part of it is the re-experiencing, TR, the re-experiencing. So the client is likely to be presenting the re-experiencing of the traumatic event. Everybody happy enough? And we can distinguish immediately there that we have post-traumatic stress. So the A in trauma that helps us understand post-traumatic stress, we understand as arousal. So nervous system activation because of the re-experiencing, because of the traumatic event. Everybody still with me? Unable to function, which is the TRAUMA, so TRAU, unable, gives us an idea of the intensity of post-traumatic. And so why is that important? Well, it's really important because if we're understanding the treatment of anxiety, and if someone presents with post-traumatic stress, then we understand that the assessment stuff that we worked on yesterday is really now not suffice, because there's an awful lot of pre-therapeutic work will be needed. There's an awful lot of resourcing that will be needed. There's an awful lot of regulation that will be needed because of the unfunctioning. So when we were doing our assessments yesterday, we were talking about people who are functional. We're talking about people who've got capacity and they extend that capacity. But when you've somebody with post-traumatic stress, it's very different, very difficult, and it can be worked with. And then the M is for month, the month that is present, and the A is for avoidance, which is part of the overwhelm of the system. So I wanted to speak to post-traumatic stress in that way, but we're not going to work with post-traumatic stress because post-traumatic stress and the working with post-traumatic stress is a different protocol. Now, a lot of what the Diamond model will do is it'll lend itself to post-traumatic stress, but it has differentiating points. And I just wanted to make that clear when we talk about presentation issues. And then we understand the complex post-traumatic stress tends to have a BPD diagnosis attached to it. Is everybody all right with that? So we're differentiating for this model the difference between that and the presentation issues of, for tonight's session, we're talking specifically about stuff like social anxiety, stuff like generalized anxiety, stuff like, we're talking about that type of presentation in anxiety. Is everybody, just give me a thumbs up. Is that all right, Thomas? We see the distinction. It's a really important distinction. And what we're saying is there's a lot more work that would have to go in the pre-therapeutic work, a lot of pre-therapeutic work that would have to go on to PTSD and CPTSD. Okay, so when we understand then the presenting issue, we understand how our clients deliver that presenting issue, how they bring that presenting issue into session with you. So if you'd let me know in the chat, how mainly does the client talk about their anxiety? how do they bring that to the session? Is it normally through triggers? Is it normally through people? Is it normally through paces? Is it normally through stories? It's them, not me, Sadie. Brilliant. It's them, not me. If they didn't stop, if they stopped doing that, and we know from yesterday what stage of process is that. So brilliant. Anybody else got anything else there? Generalized trauma, it's always there. Okay, brilliant, Armandi. So understanding how your clients, the fear of panic attacks, Wendy, I'm glad to hear you say that, because now the fear is of the panic. Now the fear is of the fear. Now the fear is of the body. Is everybody watching that? Now the fear is not of the people, places, and things. The fear is of inside, and we're going to work with that in a wee minute. Secondary pain, perfectionism, burnout, OCD, depression. Yeah, a lot of secondary pain. A lot of clients will come with secondary pain, which is the pain from the primary pain. What I can't do because of the anxiety. I can't do A, I can't do B, I can't do C. So we might be talking about comorbidity here, because we might be talking about depression. Somebody who can't do a lot, who'll feel helpless and hopeless and possibly depression. Yeah. Children triggering anxiety, that's interesting. So again, still people, places, and things, but it's outside. And Armandi, of that, anybody that does they understand the depth of what they're processing? So as you can see from here, what we're talking about is a lot of people are presenting material that pertains to the now. Is that fair enough? How many of your clients are talking about material that pertains to the then? And that's why I differentiated between PTSD, because a lot of PTSD clients will talk about the then, will talk about the event that is replaying in their minds. But a lot of clients would arrive with a deep understanding of the now through people, places, and things. And many of your clients, oh yes, so Armandi, great distinction. The children are triggering something in the then, something in the past. Now this is a really important point, because it denotes the stage of process. It denotes where the client has available to the unconscious material in their own awareness. So is there any of your clients that are talking about an anxiety that they understand is anchored in childhood, is anchored in a difficult experience that they can recall and that they can work with? Is there any of your clients doing that? That's a really important question. Let me know in the chat. Okay. So you remember our case study last night? Does it ever? So no, Wendy, a few possible health experiences, and great, which might be something else. Unawareness. So all three are triggered, but what's happening in the now? Brilliant, fantastic. And that tells us a mountain of stuff. Okay, it tells us that about the client stage of process. It tells about the client's current awareness. It tells us about the client's unconscious process. It tells us a mountain of stuff about the presentation issues. Now, if you're the client we talked about last night has relational issues, so they have a lot of fear around what looks like abandonment, what looks like rejection, what looks like in the now is being left. They have a lot of intense fear around rejection, abandonment. And what happens is they do an awful lot of scanning, an awful lot of searching, an awful lot of checking of the phone. So we would expect this client's presentation in that form to be around relationship, to be around love, to be around him, to be around what he's not doing, what he should do more, what he needs to do to understand her. You would expect her presentation to be around, and remember we talked about how this leaks into friendship. You would expect her presentation to be about the friends that aren't given, the friends that aren't doing, if they could only do, because we know this client is a stage 3 processor. Does that make sense? So we know that the stories, the people, the places, the things that the client is bringing is very, very intense. Now, what we're also understanding a step further in this client is that, like Wendy's client, this client is also afraid of the experience of panic. So the client is actually afraid of the sensations in her body. So she has no tolerance of the physical felt sense of anxiety in her body. Now that becomes incredibly important as we go to examine the next few principles. Is anybody need anything clarified about this client? Stage 3 processor, low metacognition, identifying in the now with the partner, no evidence for the partner's abandonment, no evidence at all. It is completely and utterly inside the client's own frame of reference, and there is a lot of difficulty in the relationship and a lot of difficulty in the friendships. Client is also afraid of their own body. Has everybody got that? Donna, Anne, Ruth, Tom, everybody happy there? Clear as a whistle, happy enough. Right. Any clarifying? Anything clarifying? Okay. So the presentation issues are a lot of stories, a lot of people, a lot of places, a lot of things, a lot of demands, a lot of wants, a lot of needs that aren't being met, a lot of stuff. Okay, fantastic. Now, we're going to deepen into that we're going to deepen into the understanding of what's happening in that client's world. So we're going to understand the threat system inside that client and see how the threat system operates within her, and how that threat system will produce material that they will share with you. So let us start. Let's talk about the threat system itself generically. Don't worry, it's not a lesson on biology, I promise you, it's just a list, all right? So hold on tight for me, right? The threat system is made up of lots of things, but predominantly perception, which is conscious, unconscious, neuroception, which we'll talk about in a minute, the nervous system itself and all its component parts, the limbic system and the endocrine system. We're going to pay particular attention to perception and neuroception tonight. And what I'm going to show you is the way in which the mind functions around neuroception. It is absolutely fascinating. I mean, it's popcorn watching movies, fascinating, right? So in order to do that, everyone here, I'm assuming, like I assumed yesterday, understands neuroception. So neuroception is fundamentally, just very, very quickly, is fundamentally the nervous systems, the actual nervous systems way of scanning for threat, for safety and danger. So it's the body's way of scanning the environment for threat or danger. Yeah? Is everybody with me? And that's interesting, Jilly, because it's the last thing I would do is diagnose BPD. Really interesting. So what we have here is we have a neuroception, the neuroception that is scanning for threat and danger. Now, the neuroception does this in 3 ways, right? The neuroception does it externally. So it's scanning the environment. Now we're not talking about the neocortex here. The mind's not involved at this stage. This is just the body. All right. So the body is just scanning the environment outside. Then the neuroception is scanning the inside. So the neuroception scans the inside. Have you ever had a client that says when they get up in the morning, the first thing they feel is anxiety? When they switch on, you can be sure that the neuroception is at play and it's scanning the inner world. So the interoception is different, right? I know, Jelly, you're along with me. Happens all the time. Sorry, we're talking about diagnosis, which I hit. So interoception, okay, is a different thing, because the interoception is a mind-body function. Neuroception is the nervous system picking up, like turning in on itself and scanning the body. Now, do you remember what I said earlier about the client who was afraid of her own body? You remember that client who's afraid of fear? She's afraid of the physical symptoms of fear. What do you think that neuroception is doing every day? Checking to see how she's felt. Checking to see if there's any threat inside. Checking to see. Not conscious. She's not consciously checking the neuroception. She's checking her own body. If she's got a fear of the panic, then she's going to be triggered and the unsafety if there's any symptoms in that body that the neuroception picks up as anxiety. How many of your clients are living like that? Because I did for a long time. The minute my mind was in any conscious was switched on, once I switched my mind on, my neuroception had already done its work. It had already scanned to see if there was anything and see if I got any somatic crossover. What does that mean? It means any feeling. If I had a sick tummy and the sick tummy was because of a dodgy curry, in the morning, my neuroception would read that as threat. And I'd be on threat. I'd be on that high alert. Our sympathetic nervous system will move outside the window of tolerance and be activated. Now, would I go into panic? No, but I'd be activated and I'd be in that state of high alert immediately, or alert immediately. So understanding the neuroception and its role becomes incredibly important, because not only is this unconscious process scanning the environment, it's scanning the body, and it's also scanning the third part of neuroception, it's scanning the nervous system of another. So it's watching that other and picking up. Do you ever stand beside somebody who's you can see is nervous? And you get a warning signal in your own body. That's your neuroception. It's incredible. So the neuroception is picking up three ways: the external, the internal, and other people's nervous systems, and it's warning itself. Now, this is where it becomes really, really important. And the awareness, sorry, I just caught my trousers here as I'm trying to move my legs. We talked earlier about the client's levels of conscious awareness of their pain. So if a client is bringing story, if a client is bringing people, if a client's a low stage of process and they're not available to the inner world, they're not available to their, what we would call recause, their key or core threats, then that neuroception at some level, a conscious level, understands the threats better than the unconscious mind. So let's take our client's example. The client is presenting him as the problem. The client is presenting him not connected to her as the problem. The client is presenting him as, or them as, the problem, and not making them feel safe, not making them feel loved. And if we were working with that client over a long period of time, what I'm telling you about that client at a key or core threat is that this isn't about primarily love. It's not even about connection, but it's about the experience of disconnection. It's about the internalized experience of disconnection that was felt on numerous levels as a child. It's about the totality of an experience of disconnection. It's about the unsafety of disconnection. It's about the internalized shame that is felt. I call it the totality of the experience. Now think about that. If that is locked out of the client's awareness, and I want you in the chat for this, this is important. If that is locked out of the client's awareness, if it's in the subconscious, what is the neuroception and the perception, which is the neocortex? What I can see and think and process in my mind, and the nervous system's process? What are they going to be warning about that she has no idea of? Do you see how many alarms are going to go off in that client system? Especially pertaining to the unconscious material that the client's not consciously aware of. Let me know in the chat. Does that make sense to you? All of this buried unconscious material is sitting here, client is unaware. And the entire system, unbeknownst to the client, is warning in part that she's actually quite close to that level of disconnect, or she could be close. Now, logically, there is no logic here. Logically, she's not close to that deep core wound. Logically, there's nobody leaving. The nervous system's not interested in logic. It's interested in protecting the organism from what is a life-threatening possibility. So it'll keep warning and warning. And here is the difficulty. The information that is out there is this, that it's a faulty nervous system. It's not. There's nothing faulty about it. It's like perfect. A lot of what is being warned, a lot of the material is unconscious. I was petrified of mental health. The irony of that is not lost on me. I was absolutely petrified. Do you know the film, what's it called? They're really old, it's a Christmas film. Hugh Grant was in it. What is it called? Anyway, one of them films. Love Actually. And do you remember she had a brother who had schizophrenia? I couldn't watch that film. It triggered me so badly in the middle of my process. I couldn't hear about mental health. I couldn't hear about diagnosis because it triggered me so badly. Now, does that sound like health anxiety? Doesn't it? How would that be presented? It would be presented as a health anxiety. What would we do with that health anxiety? We would try to remedy it. We would try to understand it. We'd try to rationalize it. We would try to reframe it. We would try to. But deep at the heart of that anxiety was a feeling of nothingness that I carried for the rest from I was a small child. And this nothingness would engulf me to the extent where I felt there was no point in living. And that nothingness was my burden, was my pain, was my core pain. It was one of the pieces, it wasn't at all. I didn't understand it. It wasn't conscious. I wasn't available to me consciously. But what was available to me was anything connected to it. So my neuroception picked up anything. My perception picked up anything connected to it. Think about your clients. Think about what's happening for your clients. Think about those two principles inside the threat system. And think about how many times that client tries to regulate themselves, tries to have psychoeducation and understand that the neuroception is faulty, or it's going off, or it's an ancient system and it's not wired for real life. When in fact, what we're getting here is some fabulous data. We're getting some amazing, amazing data that we don't have to reframe, that we could maybe begin, if the conditions were right, and if the system that we talked about last week was right, that we could start to work with. Does that make sense to you? Has anybody any questions on that? Now that is the difference between validating the nervous system, validating the threat system, validating the inner experience, and topping the inner experience off. Yes, Sadie, why clients of addictions? Because there's nothing working. Everything's just a regulation. It's hopeless. Yes, yes. Tell me, is there anybody need anything confirmed? Do we need to tease anything out? Is it helpful? Let me know if it's helpful. So this threat system is active. You've no choice over it. It's just part of your biology, part of your neurobiology, part of the organism's capacity to protect itself. The problem is that it is being triggered by material that we don't yet understand, and when we bring it in therapeutic exchange, it is misunderstood because there is no logical material that pertains to it. There is nothing that is concrete. And in this client, when there's nothing concrete, when the husband isn't, having an affair, when the husband is doting and loving, when the husband will only come to session to help her, then what happens for that client is they blame themselves. They blame their neurosis. They blame their madness. Yeah. Yes, Wendy, rich data, gorgeous, rich. Now you say that to a client and you're likely to get punched in the face. Rich data for nothingness, and rightly so. Who likes nothingness as rich data of a day? Nobody. But for us, it's so beautiful. Yeah. So fantastic, right? So here we are understanding the basic, and these are only two fundamental functions, right? Perception, what I can see, what I can understand, conscious perception, and also, if there's a real enlivened threat here, that nervous system's just going to go off. And that's what the perception, our conscious perception, will keep us ahead of. Because we're understanding real, alive threats that are real and active, violence, sexual abuse, when we're really in danger, and we're understanding this kind of unconscious process that's happening. Everybody all right with that? Okay. So that's the first part. Now, here's the juice, right? When I came to understand this, I was in absolute awe. Absolute awe. And I'm really encouraged by any questions you have about this. So now what we have to do, have I got everything? Because I forgot about my notes. Yeah, I think we have. Okay. So now what we're have a look at is how the mind responds to what the body's picking up. So the body is picking up a threat. The body is warned. The neuroception warns the nervous system. Yeah. And what happens is the mind has to make sense of that threat. So the mind's job here is to source the threat. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Ruth. So the mind's job here is to try and assess the threat. It's so primitive that the mind will then try and source the threat. So where does the threat become? If the neuroception or the nervous system is activated and you're in front of me, Verity, then it has to be your fault. That is the logical interpretation of this threat. So then I'm going to go and bring my material about you to my therapist, because logically, my mind has made up its mind you were there when this happened, and I was thinking this, or I was feeling this, or you said this to me, and so therefore it has to be something that you had, hence the beginning of the story. So if we have lots of neuroception, lots of perception, how much sense is the mind making of where these threats are coming from? That's why a client will jump from story to story. That's why it'll be here one day and over there the next. That's why we've whack-a-mole. Yeah. How does that feel to you? So it's very basic, right? I'm going to introduce other principles here now. So it has to source it, but it also has to solve it. So if you're the problem, which I've just told my therapist you are, then now I have to solve you being the problem by disengaging from you. Because if you're the problem, then that's the level in which I'm going to engage at. You've triggered this feeling in me. I have no capacity to deepen and see where it belongs because of all the stuff we talked about yesterday. So I'm going to sit at the level of the problem as I identify with it, as my nervous system is activated by it, and I'm going to have those conversations. And then I'm going to try and solve it at the same level. And if I'm trying to solve it at the same level, then it's just a spider's web. How many of your clients are trying to solve their anxiety at the level that the mind has identified it to be? How many? Tell me. Am I making sense, or have I lost you? 100%, hundreds say it. Yes. Almost everyone. Absolutely. It's trying to solve it at that level. Absolutely. Because, excuse me, if you think about, yes, at a low stage of process, Armandi, somebody was listening yesterday. Well done, you get the gold star, right? At a low stage of process, they'll not be able to deepen because the capacity is not there. So they will identify with the neuroception, they will identify with the perception and the way that their nervous system responds, and they will solve and soothe. No, they will identify and solve at that level. Now, how many identifications and solving do we get? How many stories do we get? See the client bouncing around. It's one thing and they think they've got that sorted. And then it comes back in another face or another space because the neuroception warns them of that. And yes, they're completely blank because they can't make sense of any of it because it feels like a jumbled mess. He's fishing in the bloody dark. We know bait. It's just a nightmare. Now, there's two other pieces of the pie. I'm wondering, how are you feeling? Are you feeling overwhelmed? How's your own nervous system before I introduce these next two pieces? Are we all right? Okay, so I'm going to share this document with you. And Wendy, isn't it easier to go blank than to try and make sense of it? Because the data is coming from everywhere. It's coming from the body, it's coming from the mind. You're trying to make sense of it. You have no awareness of the consciousness. You're afraid of your own body. You know, isn't it easier then the hunker in? And is it easier when, you know, resistance then the even deepening becomes an issue? Yes. So what we're talking about here is an incapacity, and I'm differentiating that between differentiating that between a nervous system activation. I'm just talking about an incapacity when I talk like that. Okay. So the mind's function to pain or threat is to source and solve. Source where it came from and solve it. A lot of your clients resourcing, a lot of what they do to resource themselves comes directly from the primary pain. And this has to be somatically, I know probably confusing you now, but this has to be somatically a match for the depth of the pain. That's why when you understand the level of pain, you'll understand the level of behavior that has to match it. When you understand the depth of somebody's primary pain, you'll understand the depth of the behaviors that solve and soothe it, because they have to somatically match for the the pain to dissipate, to become easeful. That's not the problem. The problem here in terms of anxiety is, you know, look at them red cheeks there, look, the night of that. And like a wee Aunt Sally, that's how you know passion there. I always get with these wee red cheeks. The next thing is really important. Number 1 and number 4. This I find fascinating. The mind needs to protect from the threat, and it needs to project for the threat. What does that sound like in real life? What does that sound like in therapeutic exchange? What does protect and project sound like in therapeutic exchange? It sounds like what if and don't do. Many times if you hear the client say, what if? What if, what if, what if, what if? It's a function of the mind's response to the threat. It is merely a protective thought, but is never experienced like that. What if, don't do. Project into the future, don't do, because that could happen. Yeah. And what if? What if, what if, what if? So project and protect. Protect is what if, what if, what if, what if, what if. How many of your clients have you heard using what ifs? Let me know in the chat and let each other know. Almost all, absolutely. This is the universality of the human condition, the universality of the mind's functions. Now, why are we talking about that? We're talking about that because how does that get into the therapeutic? How does that get into the therapeutic exchange? Now you have story. Now you have identification with who's causing the problem. Story, you have people, places, and things. And now you have a series of what ifs and don't do's. And they become most of the narrative, most of the exchange, because that's how the mind functions. The mind doesn't understand that there's something there that it doesn't understand. And it's just trying to, where it is identified, it's just trying to keep the client above water. Sometimes it does have part awareness, but doesn't want to look at it because it doesn't have the capacity to look at it. And that's all part of the same process. What will happen will be, and if you remember back the PTSD acronym, the last one was in trauma was A. A is for avoidance. Avoidance is exactly that. It's trying to protect the organism for ever experiencing what they experienced. It's the same here. So let's put that under the context of the client. So we have this wonderful, gorgeous, young 35-year-old who's at risk of losing her relationship to her husband. There is nothing rational or logical about what her presentation is. There is no reframe that's changing it. There is no understanding. There's just nothing that the client can do de-escalate, because every single day, because it's happening in a relationship, because the source is coming from the relationship, the solving in the mind is to go back to the relationship. Do you see how difficult that is? In this case, we have a client who has sourced the problem, the husband, and has also sourced the solving, the husband, or the relationships. So the sourcing and solving is in the same person. And then these protective thoughts, which are don't do and what if. So the what if, let's play there for a minute. What's your client's submodality? Is it visual? A lot of our clients have very strong visual submodalities. if the what if plays, in a visual submodality, how does the what if play out? Let me know in the chat. In this client, she's a visual submodality. What is her what if likely to play out? How is it likely to play out? And what's going to be the experience for a visual submodality? Let me know. What's going to be the experience of the what if? And once we get to terms of this, you'll see this in your clients all the time. Tell me what you're thinking. Yes, imagining, seeing, visual. Have you ever heard your clients say they see? Yes, they see themselves, Wendy. They see it play out. The what ifs play out. They play out completely visually. They see it in their mind's eye. They see it frame by frame by frame. They see the what ifs and they hear the don't do's so loudly. So they're pulling back and pushing themselves forward in the same vein while solving and soothing what they think is the course of the anxiety. So what ifs can play out, and if they're kinesthetic, they can play out physically. They can be so somatically difficult. You know, what if you're rejected? That can play out as a rolling of the shoulders somatically. It can play out as pain in the arms. It can come through as physical pain. Anybody worked with clients who showed up with physical pain and anxiety? It's really, really, really common. Because all of this material is going on inside. Yes, many instances of fibromyalgia, absolutely. And what's really interesting is, I know, and I would like you all to think about that and think about your clients. My experience of anxiety and panic and disassociation in part, but my experience of that was because I have a visual submodality, very visual. It was also very head-based and very, when I say head-based, I could see things and felt a lot of head tension. And obviously physically, you know, from the experience of anxiety. But I have met a lot, IBS, absolute classic, but I've met a lot of people and worked with a lot of people who didn't show it in these visual representations, showed it through the physical body. I've worked with people whose legs have left them. I have worked with people, literally. I have worked with people who've had frozen shoulders. I've worked with people who've had fibromyalgia. I have worked with people who have multiple somatic interpretations of the turmoil within show up in the body. So it doesn't have to show up in the mind, it can show up in the body. So the what if, so what we're talking about here is the tension in the system, the what if, the what if, the what if, the what if, because that's persistent. And the only way out of the what if is to not do. Don't do this, don't do that, because that could happen. Now, here comes the spiritual element. I'm not going to talk too much about it. But if we are all born our own unique self, the essence of ourself, how is the essence going to respond to not doing? If you were born the seed of an oak tree and you're not allowed to be the seed of an oak tree, it's constant inner conflict. It's going to strongly object. And this is where we get comorbidity, depression from anxiety, because of that internal tug and pull. Trapped, Verity, perfect. The sensation of being trapped, which is a secondary pain. It's not the primary pain. Now the client is buried in pain and can't distinguish the hierarchy at all. I'm painting a really bad picture here because the essence is all also solve, and find ways to solve. And that's the experience. They'll do what it can to solve. And it'll continue to do what it can to solve. And so that's why we talked about yesterday, what's your levels, what's your client's levels of resourcing, because this becomes so vital. How are we doing? Now, I think there might be a wee, I'm just going to pull up this document and we'll go through it. Give me 2 seconds just so I double check it. No. Ask me any questions while I'm pulling up this wee document, or tell me how you're feeling about the material. Is it making sense? I want to pull up this document and then I want to talk about how it actually transfers for you and Dean. Okay, here we are. Let me know how you're processing the material. Let me know if it's okay for you. Is it okay, Rachel? Good. Didn't see you there. Yes, Jen, yeah. Good, good. I hope it's stimulating in the right way. Okay, good, okay. All right, making sense and you can relate that. Fantastic, that's what's so important about this. It's making it relatable so that we can understand it. Okay, so we've only a wee minutes left, so let me share this for you. Okay. So these are the cognitive functions of the threat of anxiety, which we've just shown you, the thought of what if, designed to prepare the core threat for coming, to protect from the core threat. What happens if I go for that job? What happens if they think I'm a fraud? The level of the what if is in line with the level of consciousness that the client has around the pain. I'm going to say that again. The level of the what if is in line with the level of consciousness that the client has around the core key threat. If the client has identified the threat to be a person, place, or thing, then the level of the what if will always be there. If the client is a deeper stage of process and has identified the core threat as something that is a threat, an experiential threat internally, then that will be the level of the what if. And it denotes stage of process. Again, the don't do. The don't do's look like they're protective thoughts. They're designed to prevent you from exposing the core threat and will produce restricting behaviors. They will what's the word? Contract the organism. They'll contract the spirit. They'll contract as a way to create safety. They're essentially avoidance thoughts. Again, the level of consciousness of the pain of the core key threat will denote the level of the client's awareness. So if we go back to our beautiful clients, right? If we go back to the beautiful client that we had, then what we're saying is that this client is unaware that there's a deeper understanding. There's a deeper pain here rather than just him leaving. And it's actually deeper than rejection. And it's actually deeper than not being unlovable. That's the level that we might get to through deepening, because it's the only level that the client will be able to tolerate. So we might be, have windows of opportunity for the client to deepen under their sense of awareness, but you'll not get the root cause. Because the client's a stage 3 processor. She doesn't have good enough metacognition to understand it. She's petrified of her body. She's got a lot of intolerance of her body. Her neuroception scanning her body. Her neuroception is picking up whether he smiles properly or not. It's picking up his nervous system. It's picking up her friend's nervous system. She's getting all of this data. And she's trying to manage it by ensuring that she's either giving him everything he wants, she's fun and she's pleasing, she's solving herself through him, through the relationship. And she's also trying to protect herself from the threat coming. And she's also trying to protect herself. So she's projecting and protecting. How noisy does that sound in therapeutic exchange? But don't you know it because you live with it? Like, this isn't made up. Isn't this the experience? Or is it not? Or do you get really high stage of process clients who can work right in the belly of the material? Is this the experience? Let me know. Just give me a yes. Is that the generalized experience with fluctuations in stage of process, obviously? Let me know in the chat. That's the exact experience. Yes. Yeah. It's really helpful when you type in yes or no, it doesn't matter, but you express it, because other people are sitting here saying, it's my experience. I don't now understand it, but I thought I was the only one, or I thought I'm alone with this, or I thought this was just how hard anxiety is to treat. Yeah. Yes, the fluctuation and jumping in and out of the other. Absolutely. Okay, so here we are. What happens if we offer solutions at the level of what if? What happens if we offer interventions at the level of what if? What happens if we whack-a-mole? Absolutely. Can you see now why? Can you see from this small hours presentation why? Pushback. Whack-a-mole. But you know what's the worst thing? The client is so desperate for help that they'll agree with you because they don't see themselves as the expert, and that they'll take our leads on these interventions and they'll apply them, no matter what they are, whether it's regulatory tools or whether it's deepening tools, or it doesn't matter, or reframing or cognitive restructuring, doesn't matter. They'll take it and they won't challenge it, because this is in effect a hierarchical relationship where they don't trust themselves, because they have poor metacognition, because they have poor introspection, because they have poor, yeah, because they have the stuff that we talk, they don't have the capacity. So they'll hand their power over to you, us. And when we apply interventions at this level, we are plastering, which for some clients might be enough in that moment, at that time. But what happens is, as the client gets up through the stages of process, we find ourselves in our community of therapists inundated with clients who have tried all of those interventions and want to go deeper. Brilliant, Chin. No, you're not. Stay where you are. You're doing a good job, Chin. Never mind. Yeah. Yeah, they want relief and don't have capacity for deeper work. Brilliant. So, you know, Rachel, experiences of different case scenarios and somatic experience leaving you incapable of deepening due to excruciating pain of the depth and scrambling for the what ifs, stuck, given up. That's exactly what happens. So to say all of that, how do you begin to make sense of that? As the client is presenting this stuff, how do we even, hence Chin's response, forget about it and go back to accounting? How do we even begin to make sense? How do we even begin to try and help the client process this or understand this? Because if we started to try and understand this, we would likely get caught in the mind's confusion. And that's where the third part of the process comes out of. The third part of the process is a begin in the body. Begin by deepening. So for this client, because she has huge levels of intolerance, if you remember, do you remember the diamond, or do you want me to pull the diamond up? Do you remember the first side of the diamond with therapeutic exchange and everything that we're doing? and then intolerance, and then mind and body, body-led work. In this case study, I will go straight to the body. I will go straight into the body and work in the body. There is too much activity in the mind, and there is too much activity at a very kind of high level. And there is no capacity to deepen or bring awareness to any subconscious material without re-traumatizing. Given that the client's neuroception is so focused on the body, the first place I would switch off that neuroception is in the body. So then we can create some sort of capacity. Does that make sense to you? So I wouldn't play in the mind. I wouldn't be even playing with it. I would just consciously contract, do work in the body so that we could create some ease, so that we could create some regulation. So what I will be starting to do, Armandi, is I would start to work directly as we understand it. Now, you can work, yes, Elaine, creating capacity in the body is an entire process. And there's multiple processes in creating capacity. But what's incredible about creating capacity in the body is that you create capacity in both the mind and body. And when you start that process, you do all of the things that I was talking about in yesterday. I thought that was 4 days ago. You do all the things we talked about yesterday, which is build metacognition, which is build introspection, which is build unity. And the capacity that is created there, and psychoeducation, all of that stuff is the precursor for any anxiety material. Now, let me add a caveat to that. If that client didn't present the way this client is, if that client is a higher stage of process and is specialists, as anxiety specialists, the guys that are here that are anxiety specialists, they're likely to get people at a higher level of process. They might need this level of body work because they already have capacity. So we might just work a deepen. But this is part of your assessment. Yeah. Does that make sense? This will be part of how you would, and this is part of how I teach your assessment. The first thing when you go through our APP system is to understand the assessments and understand the threat system. When you understand these two things and go straight to the body, then you create much more capacity, and you have much more willingness in the client, and your interventions will then work, but they can't work prior to that because you're only intervening at the level of the mind understands. So the capacity work becomes incredibly important. And capacity work, Elaine, we're going to talk about in much detail tomorrow night, because there's an entire process to capacity work. It starts with, the basics, and then we build it from my point of view, which is what I'm trying to teach you. We build it then in this really particular way called maps and patterns. And so when we apply these interventions, because that's what they are, but they're body-led interventions, we create this capacity. So now we have a client that we understand that we must create. Yes, I know. We all need to do this work. I know. Never mind our clients. I think that's really brave. Really brave. And a lot of people that actually come to the training actually come for themselves first, and then do the training for their clients, which is fair enough. We do an awful lot of experiential learning. So we have a client who has presented with a low stage of process, with a low metacognition, with a lot of story about him and a lot of story about them, and a lot of resourcing through them, a lot of solving through them, a lot of sourcing through them, a lot of what ifs, a lot of don't do's, but is incapacitated because she's getting triggered. or neuroception is picking up him and them, or perception is picking up him and them, or neuroception is picking up his nervous system, which is acting on her nervous system. And this is just a spider's web for her. And what's really, really, really difficult now is when she gets up in the morning, the first thing that's happening is her neuroception switching on her own internal system. So even though he's not around, now she's nervous for just because her neuroception is picking up her body. And the first thing that we will do is do the body-led work. I would look at that client, I'd say there's intolerance, there's no deepening to be done, there's no mind work, there's no cognitive work at all to be done here. We're just going to work in the body. We're going to consciously contract the work in the body. I'm going to psychoeducate so she knows why we're working in the body, so that there's a conscious contract between the two of us, and we're going to work there. And tomorrow we're going to detail how we're going to work there. And we're going to explain the creating the capacity and the functions of creating capacity. Oh, how he's feeling? He's all right. That was super quick. Is that all right, then? Good, good. Makes sense, as long as it's making sense. As long as it's helpful and you're seeing your clients. Is the case study helpful? Yeah. Making sense, Armandy. Good, good, Verity. Sadie, how's it making sense? Brilliant. I'm delighted. Brilliant, Donna. Was that fast, Donna? Or Wendy, sorry. All clear, makes sense. Good. Okay. All right. So I hope what you've learned from that is that if it's not safe, we don't work in the mind. If it's not safe, we have to clean the body to create the safety to be able to work in the mind. That's a kind of one sentence version of what the 2 days was. Okay. Good. I know, Chin, but listen, we can only do what we know. We can only do, and you do understand where this information is coming from, don't you? You understand that this information is coming from a direct experience. So this information isn't readily available out there. You'll not go to another program and have this information. It's very unique to us. So do not give it's very unique to this model, very unique to what I teach. And we're in the process of scientifically proven all of this. We have a lot of anecdotal evidence. There's a lot of people here with a lot of anecdotal evidence, like hours and hours and hours of clinical practice and story after story after story after story, right? But what we're going to try and do is then get the researchers and so this isn't out there, Chin, so don't give yourself a hard time. It's not readily available information. Good. So take it easy on yourself. You're doing a great job. And please don't leave. No, there's an entire process for Verity of working in the body. There's and it's a scale of process. And we'll talk about that tomorrow, because there's such disunity that we have to literally climb. We have clients that are so resistant, you literally have to kind of like sidestep in and create capacity very slowly. And that shows me the level of process your clients are at. If they have incapacity to be in their body, very low stage of process, very difficult. And I'd imagine you're exhausted. I'd imagine the clients that see that level of process can take an awful lot from us therapeutically. So mind your wee self. Okay. Yes, thank you. The universe provides. Some days I wish it didn't provide and I wasn't sitting here in front of you and I was in Barbados somewhere. with a good cocktail and not sitting in Donegal sweating in a wee cabin trying to deliver this information. I'm only joking. Okay, exhausted, Margaret. Ticket. I know, yes, it leaves you exhausted. It does, absolutely. Let's go Barbados. I'm with you for Verity. Let's all go. I know. And this is what these days, and let me just be really clear, these like week sessions are so that I can get my message across and start to change the way trauma, the way anxiety is treated and trained. But it's also to invite you to train with me and become part of our team and become part of the people that we can send people to. So it's, you know, part of it as so that I can change the narrative and that we can actually put people on the ground, boots on the ground. Okay. And we can clear your travel anxiety, no problem. I will see you on Thursday night. If you've got travel anxiety, there we are. Where's Armandy? There's our work for our sessions. Brilliant, fantastic. All right, my loves, if nobody else has any questions, we'll wrap up here. Is that all right? And I'm loving the chat. Thanks for all your engagement and keeping me right. For the guys that kept me right. Thank you all so much. And hopefully it was worth your time this evening. All right. Thank you, Ella. Thanks a million, Chan. All right, Chan. See you tomorrow night. Take care. All right. Thanks a million, everybody. Thank you. Lovely. Thank you. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Juliet. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. See you all soon. See you tomorrow night. Thanks, Ruth. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thanks, Kerda. Wrong name, but did I get it right? Well, that's my achievement for the night, Kerda. Never mind the presentation that I remembered it and I said it right. All right, see you later on. See you tomorrow. Bye, 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 bye.